Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Enterprise Dish. I was definitely not just laughing at a joke that Rick cracked about virtual events, but here we are hanging out. Rick, did you get snow last night?
We got a little bit of jingle jingle of the freezy freeze, but
Mm.
it didn't interfere with school or transportation here into the office. I do have to put on the warmer hoodie. It's a little chilly here, right around freezing, but not enough to complain about. Nothing like we had on the evening of December 24th. Whew, that was something.
Yeah, and funny enough, that completely missed us. We got nothing.
Right, because I drove from around where you are up
Yeah,
to around where I am, and that was the hardest driving in snow I've ever done in my life. I'll just throw
really.
it out. It was crazy.
We got about an inch, maybe a little more of an inch of the white
We got
stuff.
we got 8 inches on that night,
Yeah,
and
that's a lot for Ohio.
and I was driving for like 160 kilometers right straight through it, So and it just got worse and worse. Started going slower and slower on the highway. What's usually a 2-hour drive was I don't know, 3.5, 4-hour drive. It was
Oof,
intensity.
that's that is rough, but not as rough. This one always fascinates me because they're not holistically there yet, but I know why. But Microsoft is starting to talk that they're almost completely moved to running all of their own cloud infrastructure applications on their own cloud infrastructure on Azure. They actually said, "Hey, we are almost there, except for some mailbox and Exchange Online stuff." But yeah, you know,
Yeah, I saw that news, and I remember I'm trying to Bing search it in. And of course, we're preparing so much, but I remember maybe 10 or 15 years ago, we had the same kind of discussion of
hmm
where TechNet ran and stuff like
oh
that,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's like it's 100% a dog food thing, right?
yeah.
There's no reason why Microsoft would not run all of their services, including their internal IT,
Yeah.
inside of Azure. I mean, if you think about the way the different levels of Azure and the cloud services in general can be segmented and partitioned. If you think about Microsoft Cloud for retail, Microsoft Cloud for healthcare, what's going to be coming and developing more for the government, sure, let's put
hmm
the internal stuff and all these services in. It's inherently multi-tenant, resilient. It's got native DR. Why would we do it any other way? So I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes sense too that some of the last like bastions that have not moved, or some with, I don't want to say legacy products, but they're their older
Heritage, new word, heritage.
heritage product. That is it's got value still, but they're not putting it to bed.
Hmm.
Heritage would be a good way to describe it. Are some of the last things to move, and when we say move to Azure, it means like standard Azure app like installations because they're running some custom hardware and configurations, I'm sure, and they're trying to get like a baseline of Azure products. So
That would be one of the, the corner cases would get really
yep.
sharp really quick in this phenomena. Because if you look at the Surface teams,
hmm
right? Look at some of the Windows servers and their hardware labs and their compatibilities. There's a lot more that goes into it. We can't just, oh, sure, get rid of everything. Okay, as much as I said, why not?
Right.
If you progress through the different business units, there are going to be absolute business cases where that just won't work.
Yeah.
Now, there might be software-defined elements for sure, but integration labs, if you think about especially anything with hardware or specific integration, that becomes harder to do in the public cloud for sure.
Yeah, and things, even though they are Microsoft, could just quite literally be cost prohibitive, right? It could be just not making sense to port them over to Azure to bring them over. They might say, look, that's going to cost us $100 million, and it's not going to do anything for us at the end of the day.
Well, maybe flip it around the other way. Maybe it would prohibit revenue of X,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
From in Azure, right? Everything from, the whole idea of scaling up and beyond would maybe do it another way. But you can maybe look at the kind of the lost revenue as a factor to maybe prohibit that as well.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of reasons why it's gonna take 30 people a month to do it, and it's like you could, to your point, they could be working on some contract to get that up and running, and that's potentially lost revenue from that perspective. So,
Sideways, you could look at some of these Azure Edge or, Azure Box type of scenarios
mhm.
too for some of these special use cases, right? So I actually have always thought Microsoft's been a very good dog fooder.
Yeah.
Is that a word? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? They'll pilot and set this stuff on their own and refine it, right? And I used to talk to people a lot, and they, generally speaking, I don't know about in the cloud world, but I know in the traditional software world, they usually had all their softwares, of course, for free,
Hmm.
so they could pilot the use cases and build that. So I think they've always done a very good job of that. And in the cloud era, I think it'll be really interesting to see how it grows.
I would agree with you. I mean, it's, yeah, time, I don't want to say time will tell. We absolutely know how this is playing out. And Microsoft is firmly cemented in the cloud arena, and they're not going anywhere. Speaking of knowing about things in the cloud, Rick, you wrote a post about Azure
Exactly.
storage updates. How did that work out?
Yeah, so and back to my, still targeting to be a good contributor. And I know what I'm going to write for the next one, but I think I wrote a post at the Petri site about be the first to know about Azure Storage Explorer
Yeah.
updates. And so if you use Azure Storage, you really should use Azure Storage Explorer. For one reason, it's the easiest way to do day-to-day manipulation.
Hmm.
Now, I use that for my Azure Storage stuff. Let's just say just as often, and sometimes more often than I would the actual Azure portal. So it's like that. It's that must-have tool. Right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I always like to know what's coming, what's changing, right? Everybody wants to know what's coming, information. So the Azure Storage Explorer, one of the capabilities that it has is that it updates very often, right? It's the nature of the cloud
Sure.
cadence. Yet this Azure Storage Explorer is like a standalone app. That being said, you can run it and it'll give you messages that it's going to update or needs to update or whatever. But if you subscribe to the GitHub project, you'll actually get all the reports of the pools and the uploads and the all that good stuff, right? So that's actually the first indicator of a new version of that tool going to be put out. I'd also go so far as to say if you have other softwares that you like, if you find the GitHub project, you're going to be first in line to know. So having the right information the quickest is really valuable today. And it's not just, okay, now I can do XYZ capability with said tool. It's more around maybe the limitations, known issues, what's working, what's not. That's also what I look at very seriously, because like the email that I get whenever there's a milestone in the GitHub project, that's very helpful to me. So that was the whole nature of that post that went up earlier this month or so.
Yeah, it's actually, I was just looking at the stats. It's actually indexed pretty well.
Okay.
So I mean,
Kind of professional.
yeah, well, it's like, from a content perspective, you hit publish, right? And there's always that initial arc because like I tweeted out, Rick tweets,
Yeah.
right? But for especially a publication like Petri, we really look at that long tail because we need a lot of sustained traffic on posts just over an extremely long period of time. I mean, there's tens of thousands of posts on Petri, and if each one of them got one hit a day, it's phenomenal. And so this one looks like it actually indexed pretty well based on, I mean, it got 150 views actually yesterday, just yesterday alone.
Well, and it's in long tail time now.
Yeah,
So,
and that's roughly a month after it came out. So
that's good.
yeah, no, that's actually really, really good. Which dovetails nicely into a question we got into the inbox, Rick. Now, this one's sort of interesting because I don't know if we're going to have enough details, but I'm curious on your thought. A reader wrote and it says, can Rick describe how he thinks about Azure storage? There are a lot of options in trying to decide between fast or slow, solid state or mechanical, long-term, short-term. How does Rick approach his storage consumption and purchasing when it comes to Azure?
That's a very loaded question.
Yes, it is.
Which I'm going to write that down because that will be my next blog post. Well, but because it's a very long form thought, how to choose the right Azure storage, right? Because I think that's a great question. So I have a short answer, but I'm actually going to write that up as a long answer because that's a brilliant question. So a number of guiding principles I would bring out first. One is be careful on premium. Right? Just because of the cost. The performance is great, but does whatever you're doing with that storage resource need that? Now, my biggest most frequent, I should say, use case of Azure Storage is around the use case of backup. And I
Hmm.
really don't need that as premium. No, I don't, not at all. So I can save a little bit of money because it's backup storage, right? Now it's just me. It's what I do in my day job. But if I'm talking about Azure Files, different story, especially about something that's going to be constantly read and have writes, maybe not as often, but high read rate type file
Hmm.
shares, then I would entertain it. And especially if you're looking at some of the newer services are only available, like Azure NFS files, which is in preview, I believe, still is only available in premium, right? So that almost prescribes the higher cost.
Yeah.
Now, I would also look, and that's more like, files and disk.
Hmm.
Okay. But then if you go over to Blob, Blob has hot and cool. Okay. Now, maybe it's warm. Sorry, I'm drawing a blank here, but there's hot and then the other one. The main thing, and that's a property of your storage account. Again, what's your use case? If you're like running a application that jumps all over the place with little bits of data, you could probably get away without running hot. Something like even storing backups, I don't recommend hot either. It's not worth the extra
Hmm.
cost. But one of the beautiful things about Azure Storage is you can change that level on the fly. And use case, I have a whole bunch of backup data in Blob, and I need to restore everything now because I had a ransomware issue. Well, you can automatically promote it to hot and get that throughput without, for the 3 years ahead of time, having paid that premium. You can
Really?
change it on the
Hmm.
fly. So keep that in mind. So I would really give some thought to the use case of that type of data. Now, again, I spend most of my world doing backups on Blob, file data on Azure Files, and disks. So like VMs, right? Now the VMs, it's almost just as much of a decision around how much CPU and memory, all of that jam, right? But there's a lot in that, and I'll also admit I don't do much with tables and queues. So those are two other
Gotcha.
families of Azure
Hmm.
storage. I just don't have the expertise there, so I don't have any specific advice. So totally riff-raffing off the top of my head, those are a few things that I've brought up, and from I'm going to make that would be a really good post to write up on the site. From I don't know who asked it, but I'll just say Reader McReadface asked that question, or something like that. But we'll write that up in a little bit longer form across the different services. But the number one question is, what's the use case? What's the app? Are there requirements? Will you feel the difference? Do you notice the difference? Those types of things.
Hmm. Yeah, it gets complex. I mean, you are far more experienced in this than I am.
I don't
But
know
I
if that
know
helps.
roughly like their tier SKUs and how many they have and the different options you have. And then you start looking at VMs and throwing CPUs in there with storage. And there's quite the matrix of solutions and options. And choosing the right one can be challenging.
Two other things just came to mind, which are actually, of course, the most important.
Yep.
One, look very specifically on the RS, LRS, GRS,
Hmm.
the redundancy service level of a storage. Not all storage services have the same level of redundancy services.
Okay.
Example, premium file shares in some scenarios are only available in LRS, locally redundant. If you truly need other region availability, that almost prescribes that you need to have a backup of it. Okay. So
Hmm.
that actually is very interesting. The other most important thing, oh, what was the other one? I forgot
Cost,
it.
availability,
No.
bandwidth.
Oh, yeah, it is cost. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Do a cloud economic model ahead of time and give some thought to that. And let me explain what I mean by cloud economic model. Proof of concept, pilot with that configuration.
Hmm.
Kind of set a baseline of how you think it's going to go. Because once you've implemented it, if you don't match that model, it's too late. So give some thought about your economic model pre-implementation, and then do the math out of scaling, but don't do a small scale pilot that looks okay, but when you multiply it by 10 or 20, the economics don't make sense, because if you've implemented it that way, it's too late. So cloud economic model up front. That was the other one. Thank you for the reminder. But it's like
Yeah.
they just came to me and I'm like, oh yeah, those are really, really important.
Well, actually, what I was thinking too is while you were talking about, okay, that's a great post for this month. And then I was thinking, like, man, but this might overlap too much. Is like the next one could be how to effectively like price out or something like that. Think about the most economic way of going to
How to
storage, because
build.
there's always going to be that fighting for performance or economics, right? They're kind of at the opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, how to build a cloud economic model to test upon or something like
Yeah,
that.
but yeah,
Because,
exactly.
again, once you, and I've seen people do this, once you implement it, it's too late if it is
Sure.
not good, right?
Yep.
And it really amplifies itself on scale. So I'm not saying don't use Azure. I'm saying use Azure smartly, is what
Yeah,
I'm
I
saying.
mean that's completely reasonable. You can go blow your budget real quick on AWS as well, and I've known some friends who have done that, where they choose the wrong options, and they either have way too much compute for the application, or they're choosing the wrong storage or bandwidth or something along those lines. So they're all happy to
Yeah,
take your money.
that's right. It's not a charity. It's a real for-profit business.
And then something you added to the agenda, which I cannot even believe that I forgot, because I actually even wrote this already up on Petri. And yeah, Rick is calling me out for it. Microsoft Ignite announced Ignite Part 2 is going to be happening in early March.
Yeah, so I was, on my work here at Veeam, I was preparing for that actually just now, and then in just a little bit, I'm going to be recording something, so y'all are going
Nice.
to see this shirt yet again somewhere on the interwebs later. But Microsoft Ignite is coming up. I recorded a demo on some Azure backup capabilities, which I'm looking forward to. But it's March 2, 3, 4 this year virtual event. And I like what they're doing of increasing the cadence and increasing
Mm-hmm.
the accessibility,
Yeah.
honestly, of this major event. They're still, at least on the web page, on recap mode. They haven't like fully
Right.
pivoted into what's new and stuff. But I can tell you what I've been working on is just awareness around Azure stuff, especially around new Azure storage stuff, Azure Archive. I've been working a little bit on that. Some Azure VMs stuff, backing those up, and of course some Microsoft Office 365 stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we've been playing a lot here recently, and that's what we're bringing to market in all three of those. Actually, not the Azure Archive part, but we even have free options for that I've been helping tell the story for as well.
Very cool. Well, we will definitely be on the lookout for that. Actually, uh, so I guess it's technically part of Ignite. I'm actually participating a little bit. Myself, Stephen Rose. Do you know Stephen?
How do you not?
Right, exactly.
The guy
So
with the hair.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's been around at Microsoft as long as I think of it, Exchange, maybe even longer. But myself, Stephen Rose, Paul Thurrott, Mary Jo Foley, we are doing like a recap session through Ignite this year. So that'll be a lot of fun.
Of So you're gonna, like, on March 4 or 5 or whatever, you're gonna
Yeah,
recap. Oh, cool. That's great. Yeah, I like Steven. I haven't, well, nobody's seen anybody in a while,
nobody's seen
so,
anybody, right?
but yeah, I haven't seen him in a while. But yeah, I love the hair, the glasses, the look.
Yeah, my I was thinking about this while you were talking, because usually when we go to Ignite, you're the one who's not there because you haven't been as involved, or a Microsoft MVP specifically, as of late, but you are now. And then of course Ignite
Right.
didn't happen, and so I'm hoping, Rick, that the next time we have a big Ignite extravaganza, you are going to be hanging out with us.
Yeah, and there was good reason for that. I love Ignite. I love all the events, but I had to make a decision for me and my team a while ago on how we prioritize
Hmm.
our time. And I think
Sure.
IT professionals have this same conundrum a little bit more. Now you look through my office here, it's like a museum of events and stuff that I've been through over the years, and I truly love going and interacting with the IT communities, make no mistake. But the reality is I'd have VMware pulling my arm, I'd have Microsoft stuff, I'd have NetApp, Cisco, EMC, and HPE, and just
Yep.
pure storage all the way down the line. It's a lot.
It
And then
is.
Veeam stuff. And Veeam stuff is actually getting to be enough of an agenda to manage too. So I made a decision for my team, and this was when it got out of control. I mean, I'd have two people in Europe flying over to Europe while me and another guy from the US would fly over to Europe for something. I'm like, wait, it's, no, let's not
Yeah.
four of us cross each other in the middle of the night. Let's locally focus and
Hmm.
align. So we actually made a decision here at Veeam, at least for my team, that our priority topics would be to focus on Veeam events. But then from our partners, it would be the platforms we protect. So that would be Microsoft. And Microsoft sits in two buckets. It's both on-prem, like physical servers, Hyper-V, but then also Azure and Office 365. So Microsoft really sits first in line there. Then we think about workloads we protect from VMware. So vSphere type workloads. And then we also think about that other cloud. And then to an extent, Nutanix as well. Right? So, but like it basically is like in that order. So with the new rules, right, I would definitely prioritize my attendance at Microsoft Ignite, should we have it. And same thing for MVP Summit. That's going to be a virtual event in March as well, right? But again, I love that one. That one's always one of the best. But I think that, let me say it this way. I believe that we'll, in the second half of this year, start to see hybrid events and some things approach normality. I think we're getting there.
I can only hope. Fingers are crossed.
We can only hope. I'm hoping. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to this additional Ignite. I got the Surface over here with the big screen that I'll watch it all day. I don't know if they're going to have that kind of looping news desk, like lack of a better word, but it was a different format. I really actually appreciated Ignite into September there, or November, whatever it was. The kind of hybrid format, that they're the virtual format with that newsroom. I liked that you could basically tune in at any time and have an experience right there. That was really cool.
Very, very cool. Well, we will make sure to include links down and below to Rick and everything, and then we'll also have links down to the Ignite stuff down in the description below for anybody else who wants to kind of tune into that stuff, and we'll be looking forward to your upcoming post here on Petri, Rick, and to everybody else. Thanks for the question, by the way, and always please reach out with questions, because not only do they give us topics, they give Rick posts, and they make this conversation just a lot more fun.